Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you all to the School Symposium. It's a partnership between the Department of Mental Health, the Los Angeles County Office of Education, and UCLA. My name is Arturo Valdez. I am the Deputy Superintendent for the Los Angeles County Office of Education, and I am super delighted to be here this morning serving as your MC for today's symposium. It's the second installment of a four-part series. Last week, in case you missed it, we had an incredible symposium last Wednesday. We had a couple of great panels. We also had on one of the panels, Dr. Terry, Dr. Watson, Dr. Smith, and Dr. Howard. We do have it all recorded, and that is available for you. I strongly suggest, if you missed it, to take a look at it, and also to share that with your staff, because it was just an incredible opportunity to get some of the professionals speaking to us about the issue of race and equity throughout our county and our nation. So thank you for that. Couple of quotes that I got from the symposium last Wednesday. None of us are well until all of us are well. And we also have to move beyond the conversation, and our conversation needs to move to action. And you can't talk about mental health without talking about racism. And also, last week we had a phenomenal MC by the name of Kanji Tate. Dr. Sharon, who is the Director of Mental Health, said that Kanji Tate was a shining star, and I agree with that. I too have been described as and I quote, a meteor that has gone awry. So there's a lot of similarities there. So Kanji, thank you for that and for doing such a great job last week. Before we begin, you were asked a very important question. You were asked to share how you replenish your energy so that you can tend to your well-being. And I would like to highlight some of those responses for you on the screen. There's music, nature, hiking, swimming, reading, meditation, family, of course, golfing, let's see, biking, going to the ocean, lighting some candles, reading a good book, watching some movies, baking. That's one of my favorites, baking. I saw gardening. Gardening is phenomenal. So thank you for that. Golfing, writing, journaling, sleep. Of course, sleep is critical. Prayer, let's see, walking your pup, I guess is what it is. So walking your dog, pottery is great. So thank you for all that. Friends, of course, and jogging, and of course, a good road trip is great. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing. We're now going to continue on. As I mentioned last week in our first session of our symposium series, we were pleased that the Department of Mental Health and Los Angeles County Office of Education and UCLA have come together with the UCLA Center of Excellence to offer an outstanding program to provide hope, connection, and well-being, and to support leading with resilience in school communities. Last week, we spent some time talking about racial justice and educational equity as the COVID-19 pandemic and ongoing civil unrest has amplified and highlighted the inequity across our systems. It was not an easy topic to address, but we heard valuable insight on how we can all be a part of building a more race-conscious and equitable educational system. In attendance today is our very own LACO Superintendent, Dr. Deborah Eduardo. She did a great job last week of framing the symposium and challenging us to do more. In her 30 years of professional experience, she has championed initiatives that supported the most vulnerable youth and families in our county. And we thank her for challenging us and creating the space, the safe space to have these difficult conversations and a commitment to serving school communities in LA County. This morning, we listened and learned about great work taking place around LA County districts that are being led by phenomenal superintendents and incredible student leaders on our panels this morning. And we build on last week's conversation about how the pandemic and the period of national uncertainty has impacted us all. Changing gears slightly, our conversation today will be with superintendents on how to support educator and school staff and well-being during this unprecedented time. Before we continue, if you haven't already accessed the link that was sent to you, you can click on the link, share in the chat box for today's resources and program. Also, if you have any questions, I invite you to use the question and answer function, or if you have comments, please use the chat box. As I mentioned earlier, we do have the recording from last week, so you'll have that available to you. And our team from DMH and LACO and UCLA will be supporting by reviewing and answering your questions today. So now I'd like to introduce our moderator and panel consisting of 4 highly esteemed superintendents who will share their perspectives on supporting educator and school staff well-being with you today. Now, our moderator is an exemplary leader with a robust career in education. Dr. Laurel Baer created the Sustainable All-Encompassing Gateway to Success program in the Alhambra Unified School District, where she retired as the Assistant Superintendent of Student Employee Welfare after 38 years of service. The Gateway program was created during challenging school budget times, similar to what we are currently experiencing with multiple student languages and many underinsured and non-insured. Her practice has always been to collaborate together with school communities in order to make a difference and to give more to help students to not only survive, but to flourish. She's currently working as an educational consultant with the Los Angeles Department of Mental Health. Dr. Baer will moderate an insightful conversation with 4 Los Angeles County superintendents about the impact and the pandemic and current civil unrest our country is experiencing and have had on their students, families, and of course, school communities. They are as follows. First, Mr. Arturo Ortega, AKA Tocayo, is the superintendent of Azusa Unified School District. Mr. Ortega continues to motivate me by always telling me to stay positive, but test negative. He has more than 20 years of experience in education. He has served as a teacher, assistant principal, a principal, and assistant superintendent. And for the last 5 years, he served as assistant superintendent of educational services. During his tenure at Azusa, he has been instrumental in ensuring that teachers receive ongoing professional development to fully implement the new curriculum materials and to engage students in extensive language development and critical thinking and reasoning and expanding social and emotional opportunities for students in our schools. Dr. Ruth Perez, our next superintendent, is a Paramount Unified School District. Dr. Perez was formerly the superintendent in the Norwalk La Mirada Unified School District and deputy superintendent of instructions in the Los Angeles Unified School District. Prior to coming to California, she was chief academic officer for the Charlotte-Mecklenburg School District in North Carolina and area superintendent in Orlando, Florida. She began her educational career as a high school teacher of English language learners and English language arts also in Florida. As the eldest of 6 children of an English language learner herself, Dr. Perez grew up to understand firsthand the challenges that Latino students face to achieve college and career. As a result, she has a strong sense of social justice for equity for all students. A strong believer in public education, she believes that as educators, we must offer students every opportunity to experience success and graduate ready for success in their post-secondary education. Our next superintendent, Dr. Vivian Echion, is the superintendent of Glendale Unified School District. Dr. Echion is a firm believer in empowering students to lead us next and the unparalleled power of education to transform lives. Dr. Echion remains committed to supporting the social and emotional needs of our students and providing a world-class, globally competitive education in order to ensure they're college, career, and life ready. Dr. Echion has been recognized for her keen ability to accelerate student outcomes by generating innovative solutions, closing opportunity gaps, addressing challenges head on, and elevating student voice. Prior to Glendale, she was the deputy superintendent for the Los Angeles Unified School District, the nation's 2nd largest school district, where she worked for 34 years. Dr. Echion received her doctorate from USC MA from UCLA, and her BA from CSU Northridge. Our fourth and final superintendent is of Long Beach Unified School District. Prior to her appointment as superintendent, Dr. Baker worked for 28 years in the Long Beach Unified School District as a successful teacher, principal, and central office administrator. Her leadership contributed to increased student achievement, the development of multiple district-wide initiatives and systems, and a culture of continuous improvement. A Long Beach resident, Dr. Baker has been recognized by several community-based organizations for her encouraging leadership and her advocacy for high expectations and support for students in need. She's worked closely with community groups such as Californians for Justice and the California Conference for Equity and Justice to include student voices in the development of programs and policies that focus on excellence, equity, and inclusion. Now, all the superintendents on the panel will highlight considerations for school leadership at this time, and will each have an opportunity to share what they have done to try to support school staff, students, and families. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Baer, who will moderate the panel this morning. Dr. Baer.
Thank you, Mr. Valdez, for your inspiring and kind words and with the introduction of today's incredible panel of superintendents. I am truly humbled to be among such an esteemed group of educators who are also represented not only by our 4 superintendents on today's panel, but also by the group of professionals joining us in today's symposium. I also want to thank the Department of Mental Health for their vision of hope, recovery, and well-being, along with the collaboration and work of the Los Angeles County Office of Education and UCLA. This unique partnership further demonstrates how important it is to collaborate throughout our school community and increase the capacity of support for all schools. Each of you who have joined us in today's symposium, I believe, represent the best of the best in supporting our school communities, which includes our students, parents, caregivers, and equally as important, our staff. Each of you represent our unsung heroes. Your professional demands during these unprecedented times far exceeds any university course that prepared you for preparation in your field of how to implement best practices during a pandemic, along with the movement and action in addressing and implementing changes in systemic institutional racism. Whether we refer to our teachers, our site administrators, our district level administrators, all of our incredible support staff, school counselors, school psychologists, school nurses, school-based therapists, you're the front line that keep our children safe. You're the front line that help engage our families and fully contribute to our school's community academic success, as well as their social emotional well-being. We recognize this today more than ever before, that social emotional well-being is an absolute. It's a non-negotiable. As we are addressing the trauma that our school communities are facing, along with the trauma and grief that each of you may be facing and encountering both professionally as well as personally. Our panel today, as Mr. Valdez indicated, are an incredible representation of school district leadership. Each superintendent will share with you lessons that they have learned in school leadership, but both prior to the pandemic and racial injustice movement, as well as during closure, during distance learning, and also the uncertainty of what lies ahead. It is our hope that today's conversation will help each of you move from conversation to action. For the students, the families, and equally as important, your invaluable staff. Most importantly, our panelists have focused on the well-being of their school staff, educators, and support staff, while providing strong and supportive leadership, engagement, and acceptability to the school community. Mr. Ortega, Dr. Perez, Dr. Echion, and Dr. Baker have actively recognized the needs of their school community and the willingness to address the disparities within the school system. Equally as important, they have developed and maintained a cohesive partnership that transcends systems and roles with their districts while recognizing the importance of school climate. School climate impacts our students' morale and well-being as well as our students' achievement. Today, more than ever before, our school communities, we must focus on school climate, and positive school climate impacts students, teachers, and staff that support an entire district. Harboring an environment to promote and encourage supporting school communities has been a priority for each of these school leaders that you will hear from today. And I'm confident a priority for many of you who are participating in today's symposium. The leadership opportunities for all school staff is enhanced to educate the well-being of students and their families, and in return, decrease burnout in school educators and staff. It is important for each of you to take care of yourself so that you can maintain the momentum and meet the demands placed by your school community. With that footnote, I would like to welcome our panel, our 4 superintendents. And I would like for each of the superintendents to take time to share with you and describe with you their school community and the community that they serve. And I'd like to begin that conversation with Mr. Ortega, Azusa Unified.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I hope that everyone finds themselves well. I am the proud new superintendent of Azusa Unified School District. We are about 20 miles east of downtown Los Angeles, nestled in the foothills. We serve just under 7,000 students, and those students range from preschool all the way to adult school. That population is overwhelming majority Latinx. We have about 1/3 of our students who show up as emerging bilingual students. And we have about 85, roughly around there, give or take a couple of percentages, students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. And then we have under 10% of our population who fall into the categories of foster students or McKinney-Vento students. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ortega, and we look forward to hearing from you this morning. If I could turn the same question to Dr. Perez, Paramount Unified School District.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. The Paramount Unified School District serves 14,000 students approximately, and it's a Title I district, so 100% of our students qualify for free and reduced lunch. We're about 90% Latino Hispanic, with about 27% of our students as English language learners. We are a district that is in a city that supports our district tremendously. Many years ago in 1981, a RANDS report actually labeled Paramount as the second worst city in the nation. And since then, the city and government officials just wrap their arms around it and around our school district. And the district has made incredible strides over the years. We serve the largest high school in the state of California with 4,800 students, and they have a 93% graduation rate. So student achievement is very much alive in Paramount because of the support of so many people that are advocates for our school district.
Thank you so much, Dr. Perez, and we also look forward to further hearing from you today. And if I could turn the same conversation to Dr. Eschean, Superintendent of Glendale Unified.
Good morning. Thank you for having me today. Such a pleasure to be part of this important conversation on mental health. So Glendale Unified School District has 26,000 students. It's the 3rd largest school district in Los Angeles County, and it's incredibly diverse. We have more than 50 languages spoken in our homes. We have 23% English language learners. 54% of our students are on free and subsidized meals. We have 10% students with special needs. And we're incredibly proud of our diversity. With its diversity comes the conversation of how we can meet the needs by differentiation of culture, ethnicity, socioeconomics, and other factors. It's a district on the move. We have 20 elementary schools right now that have actually students on campus as part of our technology learning pods. So it's an interesting dialogue of having students anticipating to come back to school and others who are already on campus. And I'm very happy to be here with you today.
Thank you. And we're happy that you've joined us as well. And last but certainly not least, and probably our largest district represented this morning, Dr. Baker, Long Beach Unified.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to be with you in this community this morning. Like Arturo, I assume the superintendency in the midst of this pandemic, and I'll share a little bit more about that later in our panel discussion. We are a district of pre-K through adult transition of about 72,000 students. About 25% of them are English learners, and almost 70% of them experience support because they receive free and reduced lunch. We have about 84 schools, spanning from schools that are walking distance from the ocean, all the way up to the northern tip of our community that touches the Compton borderline. A beautifully diverse group of students and staff that work hard every day to make a difference for students in terms of excellence and equity. We're also proud to have an Educare school, which is an infant, toddler, and pre-K campus of about 200 students. And many of you may know that we have a K-12 school on Catalina Island that serves about 650 students. So proud to be here today to share the really good work of the team in Long Beach Unified.
And thank you, each of you. We're so proud to have you here today. It's apparent that each of your districts has some significant similarities, but very distinct differences. In today's participation, I'm sure that many of our professionals that are on today's call will be able to relate to each of your districts independently. We know that today more than ever before, distinct leadership and experience is extremely important as you are facilitating and administrating the uncertainties that lie ahead. So what I would like for each of you to be able to do is if you could share with the group your professional overview pertaining to the several challenges that you have faced in the last several months. And so I'm just going to run down a list, and then certainly there are probably many more that you'll want to address, but how has your district and community been impacted by COVID-19? And in addition to that, how has your school district and community addressed the racial injustice movement? How has it impacted your community? And how do you determine the needs of your staff and school community, anywhere from access to equity and beyond? And perhaps we can begin by starting with Dr. Perez.
Laurel, unfortunately, my computer just froze for a moment, and I only heard a little bit of what you said. I'm going to try to connect on another computer, if you wouldn't mind starting with another one of my colleagues.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. And I'm going to move to Dr. Echion, if I could, with Glendale.
So it's the story of a community that has schools as its center. So COVID hit us very hard because the fact that we had to send our students home and for them to engage in distance learning was a shock to the system. As our schools are the center of the community, it wasn't just about the learning that had changed and the 15,000 over devices that we had to distribute or the meals that had to be served. It was about the connections and the relationships that have been disrupted. So one of our priorities early on, and it has continued, is to polishing the relationships in the virtual community. And at the same time, recognizing that this was a behind the curtain view of what was happening in our schools. And the dialogue quickly shifted to equity in ways that it's never shifted before. So we have begun conversations and significant amount of trainings for staff and community together to discuss implicit bias, to talk about ways in which we can really develop culturally relevant and responsive educational narrative in our city. And the partnership with the actual Glendale city has been very helpful. The history of Glendale has not been incredibly thoughtful around race and equity. And most recently, a couple of weeks ago, the city of Glendale actually recognized the ways in which people of color were treated and apologized. It was a sundown city years ago, and we now as a community have made a decision that we will no longer will stand for what the history entailed, but we will take bold steps to change that and be inclusive, not just from a historical perspective and not just from a distance learning perspective, but the social emotional needs of our community members.
Thank you. And if you could just briefly speak before we turn to our next superintendent on how you determine the needs of your staff.
So we send surveys. We have stakeholder focus groups. We are engaged with our principals and staff at the individual school sites. We collect the information and we focus on what the needs are, whether it's technology that may be a need, or a scheduling change, an alternative schedule, or referrals to mental health support. The list is long, but the reality is that it's all about building that virtual community and building relationships and having the comfort to ask for help.
Thank you. A key word, asking for help. And why don't we move to Dr. Baker?
Thank you. So I can build on many of the things that Vivian shared, starting with a focus in the Long Beach Unified School District on relationships. And in the documents that the participants will have access to actually included something that we call our understandings continuum that places relationships as part of our instructional vision. It's, if you go into the documents, it's U6, we call it, and it is how to focus on relationships alongside classroom instruction. Like everyone else, closing schools on March 13th turned everything upside down. And because our classrooms are known and they are the place where the magic happens between teachers and students, we spent many weeks and the months leading up to the reopening of school thinking and supporting teachers and administrators and how to do that in a virtual setting, which is difficult for adults to do, and it's also difficult in the teacher to student relationship, providing both professional development and also trying to help folks create a lot of spaces where they could talk about this difficulty and talk about what they were trying without feeling as if it had to be perfect. And we've used that term, like many of you, about giving grace for one another, accepting approximations, and trying things in a way that we just suspend judgment about a conversation or a way to engage students and teachers, but really just being mindful of opening up and giving grace to one another. We built on many projects that were happening in our district in smaller scale to accelerate our work in equity. We've had several initiatives that I had the pleasure of actually leading with partner organizations such as Californians for Justice to center student voice and to bring in students right alongside adults to tell their story and to help us think differently about what equity looks like and feels like from the student experience. So we will continue a convening of a group last year that was an equity and inclusion design team that was half high school students and half professional colleagues, administrators and teachers who were helping us to think about the work across our schools. As part of that effort to address issues of equity, we'll be expanding our relationship-centered schools work that also is supported by our partner organization in Californians for Justice. And I guess lastly, I would mention just on the topic of students and community engagement, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. We are really trying different methods of engaging our community. As members of the community suffer so much, having to stay home and being really localized to their neighborhoods and not being able to come out to our school buildings, trying to look at methods for outreach that are literally in the community, at the sidewalk, outreach to families, which I'll talk about later as well, by different staff, counselors and administrators who are safely making their way out to sidewalks and to front porches to engage with both students and families to try to meet their needs, both around technology, mental wellness, mental health and wellness for their students, and to stay connected to our families in a way that honors the experience that they're having. Like Vivian shared, we have used advisory committees and focus groups. We've had surveys of parents. We're using thought exchange to engage both students and staff in gathering their insights, and many different kinds of surveys to take our next steps and use that as formative information for what we're doing.
Thank you for leveraging these crises as opportunity for change. That's very apparent. And if I could go back to Dr. Perez, are you ready to go? Have you gotten things in order?
I am, but unfortunately the picture on the computer that I'm at won't allow me to show my live self here. But I will share with you that, you know, the pandemic was not or has not been very kind to our school community, especially our students and their families. And, you know, of the many lessons that we immediately learned, having assessed through surveys and parent meetings and conversations, we realized immediately that we needed to develop a school district-wide strategic plan to address the isolation and the anxiety, the grief, the loss, the decline in socialization that affected our school community. We realized that we needed to teach our students how to recognize, manage, balance their emotional upheaval through a lens of compassion and ongoing support of staff, counselors, psychologists, and social workers. And we also realized that our families very much needed to be a part of this, the development of this strategic plan. Fortunately, we had already started working on social emotional learning, but one of the things that we quickly realized is that our teachers and our staff themselves needed to have their needs addressed as part of this support plan. And we were able to engage, you know, our city, engage our parent groups, our DLACs, our PTA, and everyone to share with us in June, you know, what March through June meant to them and what their needs were, and gather this information to create a learner support plan, which includes parents, excuse me, includes parents as well, and includes staff, and be able to deposit into that plan a lot of resources that came from within literature and within support services and organizations that we made available and continue to, on a weekly basis, remind people that this is there for their support and their well-being. And at the same time, create just an understanding of the need to look at everything through a lens of compassion, because everyone is in this together, is what we always say, and we will get through it together.
Thank you so much, Dr. Perez. And if I could turn to Mr. Ortega with the same posing question.
Thank you. So in terms of the effect of the pandemic, there are the things that one might say obvious, devices, technology, internet connection, basic school supplies. But the pandemic has had, the reason we're all here, some of the effects that have surfaced, especially around our staff, are the stressors of feeling like I'm doing this for the first time, or the stressors of I signed up to change lives and right now I feel like I am not being able to do anything. The stressors of rapid change in information and decisions coming from all over the place, and the headlines. Sometimes that information goes 180 degrees. And so how you navigate that is something that we have definitely been aware of and are taking note of as, and by the way, this is all staff. This is from classified to certificated to management. Everyone is having to navigate this, and these stressors are real because people want to do the best for our kids and for our community. Layer on top of that, as you mentioned, Dr. Bear, is the civil unrest. And I want to tip my hat off to our Board of Education and what we have done here. We not only are going to be addressing systemic racism, but we want to actually go the full way and say we want to become an anti-racist organization. And what I'd like to share that I'm very proud of is when we are going to address systemic racism, we're going to look at it through 3 different buckets or 3 different lenses. So lens number 1 is our staff and ourselves. Things like, implicit bias, cultural appropriation, things like that. But we're also going to look at systemic racism through our curriculum and our courses. And then lastly, systemic racism in our data. When we're looking at data, whether it's attendance, achievement, whatever that may be, how can we have a lens of equity and access through those three buckets? In terms of how we are assessing the needs, especially of our staff, now more than ever, there is a call to use what some people might call soft skills, 21st century skills, and those skills of listening, of asking, of learning, of empathy, of trying to understand. So a couple of things that we have done to engage our staff. Every other week, I hold a all staff optional meeting. It's a live meeting. Communication through email, memos, flyers is amazing, and we do that still. But people want to connect, and people want to listen, and people want to have an opportunity to speak or be heard. That is extremely popular. We do that every 2 weeks, and we have over 100 folks sign in on a weekly basis. We too are amping up the frequency of checking in with our staff in terms of surveys. I am spending a lot of my time out of my office at school sites, checking in with staff, listening, again, asking questions, trying to keep that ear to the ground and that pulse of what is happening with our staff, so that when decisions are being made, that we're definitely keeping that at the forefront of what we are doing.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ortega. It is very apparent that each of your leadership styles have maintained and sustained while changing at the same time. And with that leadership, it's very apparent that you are supporting the needs of the staff by decreasing burnout and being able to increase engagement. So a few of you addressed it briefly in your conversation and made reference to later conversation. So I would like to ask you what you are doing and the strategies that you are using in promoting and sustaining engagement by your students, by their families, and equally as important, by your staff. And that would be in relationship to before the pandemic and the racial injustice movement, and then after, since you've been in distant learning mode after the lockdown and stay away orders, what you've had to adjust or done differently to ensure and sustain that engagement. And I'll let anybody who would like to begin, I'll leave it up to our 4 superintendents who would like to take the lead on this one.
I can start. Can jump in and begin. Going back to the spring, something that our community responded very positively to was the opportunity for us to connect with both students and adults, internal adults as well as our families, through a series of video messaging that actually began on the first day of our closure on March 13th. What they responded to most was not just the information. We provided a lot of information, but we also built a community through the messaging that we did. It started off on daily messages, different messages to students than to adults. It brought in some humor and some levity to situations. For example, our deputy superintendent had Wig Wednesday, where she would wear a different wig and engage with students on aspects of well-being. And so we used the platform. All of it's available on our YouTube channel for those of you who are interested in what it actually looked like, to express messages of gratitude, to cultivate strategies for coping, both for students and adults who were managing, to provide resources that were community-based resources as well as our district resources, and to really promote the idea of self-care, even for families and staff and students who were staying home during the very restrictive stay-at-home order. We also used our social media channels in a way that cultivated these same messages. So self-care messaging, ways that families could engage with one another in providing self-care and really coping strategies for one another, and in this way of building community. That led us into summer, that helped us to think about what that engagement would look like in summer. And so just to reiterate, the use of tools like thought exchange that could be used at a distance, but gather really user information from families in their buildings, from teachers and other community members to bring their voice to the conversation. And then it has led us into the launch of multiple new ways of engaging with our community, including the launch of a superintendent's advisory panel, an equity team that will include students on the district leadership team, and a number of other opportunities for students to participate as leaders, because that student voice perspective, for those of us who have explored that, if you get students to the table, they have a lot to teach us and a lot to tell us about their experience. And they're often not bridled by some of the things that happen to adults not wanting to say something or worrying about the politics of what they might say or the repercussions. We have found our students to be a great voice to help us move forward in what we want for our schools and for our families.
That's outstanding. And you'll hear later in this morning's symposium a student panel. So it speaks to exactly what you're mentioning. If I could ask another superintendent to share some of their strategies with promoting engagement, both of students, families, and equally as important, their staff.
So I'd like to weigh in on that, if it's okay.
Absolutely.
So the first phase was very much shifting from a fearful state to a calmer one. So our activities were all around predictable routines, positive interactions, and elevating community and student voice. And then we recognized the need for differentiation. So we set up individual counseling and support groups that were offered at our schools and also by grade levels for the parents. And then we had weekly parent and guardian support groups. And then clinicians and mental health interns. We have 31 interns assigned to our GUSD schools to connect with students in need and build positive relationships. We also recognized that some students really weren't doing well, and we needed to focus on QPR, question, persuade, refer, because the number of suicidal ideation information we were receiving was concerning to us, and that has been really one front and center, particularly for our students at the secondary level, and the way in which this isolation through COVID was impacting their mental health. And then weekly mindfulness lesson, district-sponsored mental health well-being forums, and we've applied for grants to be able to add resources. On the discussion around race and equity, we have work groups now. One work group particularly focuses on our curriculum and weeding from our libraries to the curriculum that's taught, to the history social science adoption that is taking place. And we're trying to move from a parallel curriculum to truly integrating it and using the teaching tolerance and social justice standards as part of the dialogue, but also creating that as the backbone of what will be happening in the future. We've recognized that hiring and recruitment has to dramatically change to become really a representation of the students we serve. So every time we have an opportunity for hiring, we're looking at it from a very different lens than we have in the past. Parent engagement groups and also community engagements, connections made with the hospitals, connections made with the USC Race and Equity Center, and Pacific clinics. We know we have to create a consortium to support our community, educators, parents, and we're really not differentiating so much by employee versus non-employee, but looking at COVID as a community building opportunity that really does not differentiate based on who you are.
Thank you. Such important work, Dr. Eschean. And if I could ask Mr. Ortega to round up this final topic.
Yes, so like to, first start off by saying that, pre-pandemic in Azusa Unified School District, we were very proud of our engagement strategies from an award-winning parent advisory committee process for our LCAP, moving from parent involvement to parent engagement and then to parent leadership. So a lot of engagement in terms of our community. We were very proud of that. I think that post-pandemic, with our staff and with our community, the biggest thing that we've had to focus on is really be intentional about what and how. So before it was about curriculum, instruction, student achievement, the next decision, the bond, and all of that is still important, but you cannot get to that if your staff and your community is not well. So we have shifted our focus in terms of when we are engaging with parents and when we are engaging with staff to make sure, again, that we're good listeners and good learners. So just like I mentioned earlier, this every other week live session for staff where they can just come in and get updates and be heard. We also have held live events for our community, again, with very little content and a lot of opportunity to engage, ask questions, share frustrations, share, what the stressors are to help us really understand what is happening and what is going on. With our labor partners, because just by design, and I think that's right and good, sometimes they hear more than we do. And so establishing more frequent than pre-pandemic for sure, labor partner standing meetings, live meetings, again, yes, adding some business, but really minimizing the amount of the business and more about the well-being and what staffs and constituents are talking about, what they're stressing about, what communication gaps there might be, and ideas that we might employ in our district to continue to engage our staff.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ortega. And Dr. Perez, I see you on camera now. Would you like to add anything to this conversation?
Sure. I'd like to add to the plethora of ideas and strategies that my colleagues have shared, that something that is really working well in our community, given the fact that a lot of our families are not able to come to our sites. We have really been empowered through just YouTube Live to provide on a weekly basis. We have, we started calling it Tech Tuesday because one of the stresses our families indicated they have is that they themselves are not comfortable with the technology that their students are using, and they want to be able to help their students. So we've started weekly training for parents on YouTube Live, and on Tuesdays at 5:30 p.m. if anyone cares to join. But one of the things that we do is also record it so that families can see it at any time. And of course, we offer that in English and Spanish, but also on a weekly basis in order to connect with all employees. I went to a weekly process of gathering information from them through a Google form simply of questions, ideas, strategies, and recording a weekly message where it's given me the opportunity to remind them of the importance of self-care, remind them and tell them stories of things that are happening in our community and among our students. And that connection through the media, through video, has really, I think, helped us to engage our families and somehow get a sense of being connected during a time like this.
Absolutely. Such important work that each of you have shared. It sounds like you're providing a space or a forum for feedback, which is so important to support your staff as well as students and their families. And you're offering options for feedback. So those that are not as comfortable, for instance, in technology, you're giving them other ways so their voices can be heard, which will help to sustain their participation in their engagement. And we know that you can't do this alone. None of us can do this alone. We weren't prepared for these circumstances, and our days are beyond 24/7. So I wanted to move the conversation to your partnerships. And some of you have alluded to the partnerships that you have established, but we would like to hear from you on how you promote partnerships between your schools and the community, as well as between the community, families, and students, and how you identify who those leaders are in your school community, while also addressing the importance of self-care, being able to step back and just breathe. So we'd like for you to share a little bit about those strategies. And we know that it should be strategic, that more isn't necessarily better if not everybody is on the same page. So if you could enlighten us with how you strategically recruit and identify those partners that truly can contribute to your school community. And maybe we can start, Dr. Baker is on the screen. Maybe we can start with Dr. Baker.
Sure, I can share a few things. We are fortunate to have a number of community groups that have a long history of interacting with the district, both in providing constructive feedback and also supports. And so much of our work over the last 6 months has just built on that foundation. I made note of Californians for Justice. We've had a multi-year partnership as they've worked to develop youth leadership in a number of our high schools, which this gave us a chance to really elevate that work to think about the student voice perspective. We were very intentional about our outreach, and I'll name a couple of other partnerships, but our outreach in having Californians for Justice bring forward students who could share their experience as they were going through the pandemic. That looked specifically like Zoom opportunities for a focus group with me and with other staff, so that they knew that this was our need was to hear from students from the board to the superintendent all the way out to the school level. And obviously schools have much more relationship with families and students because of the nature of a school. But we also at central office need to hear for all of the plans that we're making, how parents and students experience those plans. So Californians for Justice has been a great partner in our work. The NAACP, the local branch of the NAACP, has given us an outlet for two-way communication, to hear from them, to promote things that are supporting the African American and Black community, as well as to push resources to them that they can share with their membership. We have a strong relationship with Latinos in Action. a very grassroots organization that provides neighborhood and community leadership, focus on Black and Brown students. And as recently as last week, I had the opportunity to sit in a Zoom community, but to listen to their perspective. And I think my moving into this leadership position during a pandemic, I think Arturo said it as well, but a lot of listening and a lot of really seeking out the lived experience of students and families so that our decisions center them in everything that we do. Even when that feedback from families is difficult to hear because their experiences are so dramatic during this pandemic, it is important that we're listening, and that not just listening and taking notes, but listening and thinking about where in our system can we better ourselves in order to meet the needs of our families and our students.
Excellent. And with meeting the needs in addition to your staff, have you done anything different with establishing those partnerships and that relationship?
In terms of staff, we have a lot of internal capacity to support staff. We're really fortunate in our division of curriculum instruction and professional development. They have done a lot of work with specifically to teachers. But I think I would love to highlight that a lot of our work with schools has been really powerful through our work with principal supervisors and their work with principals. And so we have a really talented group of principal supervisors whose primary role is to meet the needs of principals and schools. And so some examples of things that they did that was very intentional, when school staffs started to return back in May, we did bring our office staffs back and many others to close the school year, rather than just assume that after 6 weeks of being sheltered at home, that they could just walk into a building. Our principal supervisors nurtured ways and systems for bringing staff back. For example, worked with principals on having one-on-one conversations and outreach with staff members before they were walking back into a building. They helped them to feel comfortable in all of the safety measures that had been put in place so that they could communicate that with staff. They helped our principals to have ways of communicating and building in structures for discussion that were on topics including experiences of racism, loss of family members through the pandemic, and creating spaces that were non-judgmental and supportive of staff who were experiencing really dramatic things during the pandemic. So our principal supervisors have really been on the front lines of helping schools, both principals and teachers, to have a different experience in terms of having their needs met. I'll close just by saying that as we focus and uplift social emotional learning to a new level in Long Beach Unified School District, my observation is that by focusing on this for students, there's an interdependence that happens with adults. And as we focus on students' social emotional well-being and help teachers and principals to do that, it also nurtures their own social emotional well-being. And while the strategies may be different, I think that we're going to see a positive effect both for adults and students in the work that we're doing.
Outstanding. Thank you, Dr. Baker, for sharing that insight. And if I could ask Mr. Ortega if he would go ahead and talk about their partnerships, which look much different probably in Azusa with some similarities, but just look at the size. If you could share those partnerships and how you promote and how you identify those critical partners for students, their families, as well as your staff.
Thank you, Dr. Barron. I just want to highlight what you said. We cannot do this by ourselves. Quantity doesn't mean quality. And so it's about finding the right partners who understand your context. We have been extremely blessed in Azusa Unified School District to have a lot of partnerships that we have been able to call on during this time. So number one is a partnership with Los Angeles County Office of Education. We have a community schools initiative, and one of our high schools is a partner in that, Azusa High School. But that partnership has bear a lot of fruit and a lot of positive in our district. For Azusa High School, 1,000%. But the district has also been able to partner with Department of Mental Health, Department of Public Health, 211, just a lot of different organizations that have benefited our district as a whole to offer resources and support for our families and our staff. We also partner with Los Angeles County Office of Education with their EASE program. That is a program that right now we are marketing, advertising, reminding, shining the light on to all of our staff, letting them know that it's not just for them, but for their families as well. We had an unfortunate loss about a week ago, and that partnership bared its fruit, and they were just so instrumental in helping us navigate that with our staff. We have just recently also started a partnership with the Western Justice Center, looking at students and peer mediation, again, systemic racism. And we did a little pilot last year with our middle schools that showed a lot of promise. And so we're excited to bring that to our high schools now and expand over the course of the next 3 years. For our staff as well and our families, we also have a self-referral system that we use called Care Solace that connects them to, again, resources and support, whether that's mental, social, emotional, food, housing, whatever that may be. And again, that is sometimes, sometimes we think, or it's confused that is for our kids and our families, and it is, but it's also for our staff to take advantage of. And so really being intentional about shining the light about these support systems that are there right now. In terms of who we're partnering with or why we're partnering with, we use a term in Azusa, and we say that when we're looking at partnerships, when we're looking at programs, can it be Azusa-fied? And basically that just means that we know that just because it works somewhere doesn't mean it's going to work here, and vice versa. Context means everything. Your situation and your culture means everything. And so we got to make sure that they are capable of moving in the same direction, capable of aligning to our mindset and our goals, and making sure that it's not going in the opposite direction.
Excellent. Such good information, Mr. Ortega. Thank you. And if I could move to Dr. Perez and see what you have to add to this conversation.
Sure. We are a smaller district, and our resources are not as many. However, I do have to say that through the Communities in School initiative, that coupled with the fact that a couple of years ago, our board supported the hiring of social workers for our schools, that has brought that component together to reach out to services that we've been able to bring in. We had services before, but this has really enhanced not only the quality of services, because we're able to get them out there more, but also the number of services that we have. Care Solace, as Arturo mentioned, is another one that we are utilizing, and that involves all stakeholders in providing services. So being able to connect, being able to bring together, social workers and counselors with the Communities and Schools initiative with the goal of bringing in more and more services, they provide that outreach to be able to bring more resources into our school community. And that has really been a blessing for us.
Outstanding. And we'll finalize this particular discussion item with Dr. Eschean. If you can share the uniqueness and highlight some of your efforts with your community partners.
So obviously what's really front and center for us is to be incredibly deliberate around our needs for our families and community members. So whether it's a mental health support and a referral to D.D. Hirsch or Pacific Clinics or our hospitals, that is a separate conversation. We also established a wellness department, which is run by Dr. Magrin and her team, and there's a self-referral system as well. So parents, students, and employees can take advantage of that. I think our greatest partners in this work, particularly during the pandemic, have been also our parents, because building on their strengths and them coming forward, being much more active and participatory, has allowed us to recognize that we have parents who can help in ways they've never helped before. So a couple of minutes ago, there was a conversation around, has participation increased? Absolutely. I think we've really leveled the playing field for everyone to feel comfortable and parents to participate at a higher level, community members to want to weigh in at a higher level. And of course, our community partners want to hear from us, like our Glendale Education Foundation, what is it that you need? So it's up to us as a school district to really clearly define where our priorities are, so we're not pulled into different directions, but remain focused on our mental health and support needs and any other priorities that our students and schools have.
Outstanding. It's such an important topic. You're absolutely right. There's too much to do on your own. So recruiting those strategic partners really will highlight your efforts of uniqueness, as well as bring in and continue to sustain the engagement of not only your students and families, but I heard from each of you, your staff are as equally as important. So thank you for sharing some of your strategies. What we would like to do is to ask you a final question and really provide some comprehensive information and thoughtfulness on what our participants today can take away. How you have gotten to where you have gotten, the lessons that you've learned, the lessons that you hope not to repeat, what you would like to share with others who are beginning to shift that practice into action so that they're able to experience, for instance, your victories and perhaps not experience some of the same obstacles that you were facing. And what you would like the group to take away today as far as next steps or actions. And if I could go ahead, and I'm just going to open it up to whomever would like to begin that conversation.
You know, I can share with you that, social SEL and the value of mental health support and services, of course, has always been, at the forefront of work that we do, because we realize the importance of that. And adding staff, for example, that can address that has been helpful. It's been influential. But one of there's so much power in the curriculum itself. And one of the strategies that our staff worked on was to look at our units of study and look at lessons that teachers were to deliver and embed within them, social emotional learning. They created resources, they created ideas and activities that are now a daily part of lesson delivery for our teachers, for their students. And that is something that made us, it's new in the sense that it made us realize that, mental health is not something separate. It's not something that, you refer students when you realize that they are in need, but assume that they are always in need, especially during a pandemic, and be able to address it and embed it in teaching and learning every day. I think it addresses not only the needs of students better, but also of staff. And that is something, that's a transformation that, I see that is very impactful as I listen in on lessons and see the work. It's providing a sense of deeper, I think, engagement and connection and building relationships with students all through the curriculum. So that's a takeaway, even for me as a superintendent, to see the power of that on a daily basis, and can only hope that the impact of that will be something even more positive for our students.
Thank you so much. And that integration and that authenticity is really so powerful. So thank you for sharing that. I can ask one of our other superintendents with their lessons of wisdom that they've learned throughout this process.
I think, as Dr. Perez stated, we've become much better listeners during this pandemic. And we've shifted our expectations to extend kindness inward and outward and not make assumptions that people know that we care. We've been much more deliberate and really tried to communicate widely that kindness inward and outward is our expectation for us, and we have to model that behavior. Also, I think we've become more courageous so that we want to come back differently and really look at the opportunity gaps and accelerate that closure rather than wait for plans to continue to take years and years for us that to happen. And then ultimately our question is, are we willing to use this opportunity to create the kind of educational system we want? And this is truly the silver lining of this horrible pandemic, that all of us have made decisions that we want more than what we had prior to the pandemic.
Absolutely. Thank you for that wisdom. I can turn to one of our other superintendents.
I'll build a little bit on what Vivian said, especially her last comment. We know the research is there. It's been there pre-pandemic. We know that learning accelerates, job satisfaction accelerates, productivity accelerates when your students and your staff, when there's a relationship, when they are well, when they are connected, and when they are being engaged. This is not new. This was all pre-pandemic, research after research. What the pandemic has done is elevated, boosted us, in some cases maybe forced us to shine a light on the importance of those things, the importance of your team, the importance of your staff, the importance of your community, and the things that we've talked about, collaborating, listening, asking, being empathetic, being understanding, building capacity, communicating frequently and often. And so for us, we just want to make sure that who knows when, but in the future, when we're thinking back on 2020, that we have not been shot back to the way things were, but to keep being champions and stewards and keeping that at the forefront, that when our staff, our students, and our community are well, when we are engaging them, when we are building relationships and their capacity, that's how you elevate learning. That's how you elevate student achievement. That's how you elevate community. And so for us, it's just making sure that this is not a lesson that goes away, but that we continue to build and to harness the power of that.
Absolutely. Sustain that momentum, correct? And our final superintendent's lessons to be learned.
Such good advice offered by my colleagues. A few things I can think to add on. On a personal level, I guess offering out to others who lead in small organizations or lead at the school level or districts, just my own kind of thinking around the arc of the pandemic. And so the early couple of months, we were all waiting for the pandemic to end. And as we saw that it was not going to be something that had a short life, as we might say, I did a lot of thinking about that arc of the pandemic and the impact of not knowing on people's well-being. And so in my thinking, part of that was just getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, which is changing information and multiple perspectives and anger and all of the things that go on for people emotionally when there's no end in sight. And so in terms of self-care, part of what I offer as someone who works a lot is finding ways to unplug. If not balance, I don't think most of my colleagues and other leaders would say that it's easy to find balance, but to take opportunities to take your own advice on self-care and find ways to unplug and to stay in some kind of community that is supported. Both students and other adults, they say over and over again, even if it has to be on Zoom, to be in community, both formally and informally with others, is in many ways life-saving. And so that's a lesson learned. And then two things that I just continue to come back to that has also been stated by my colleagues around using this time as transformation, and to encourage people not to talk about going back to something, but talk about creating the future. And a couple of my own lessons learned, or just thinking about that, is using this moment to create a movement. And so we've had a couple of really rich examples. We had a grassroots effort led by several teachers through a professional learning community on Twitter that resulted in more than 200 staff members participating in a summer Black Lives Matter book club. We purchased the books, they did the studying and the discussion, they centered Black leaders, Black teachers as the moderators of those groups. And at the end of the summer, based on that grassroots effort, I challenged them, can you double the number of participants? And they did. And so this fall, there will be almost 450 people from all different roles and responsibilities in the district coming together from that grassroots effort to really study on how to make our district more of an anti-racist organization. And then lastly, I'll just reiterate that social emotional learning is no longer something for counselors. It's no longer something, well, not for counselors, it is for counselors, but it's not just for counselors. It's not just for students of need. It is for all adults, and it is for all students. And so I shared in some of the resources that participants will have access to a completely different approach to starting the school year, which we called Smart Start. And it is centering social emotional learning at the onset of the school year in a completely different way than we ever had, which then leads with new staff in this work of social emotional learning, creating SEL right alongside academics this year. And while it's not perfect, and it's going to be something that will take us a couple of years to really get to the point that we want it, it's a very different approach to what we're offering to our teaching staff to bring into their classroom spaces.
Outstanding. And I think that we would all concur that we have a moment to create movement, and this is a non-negotiable. We have no other choice. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We all have a hand in everyone's success as a school community, and the need to create positive, engaging learning environments. I've heard that we need to build relationships with our students, with their families, and with our staff is greater than ever before. You know, in closing, there's a saying that says that individuals may forget what we've taught them, but they will never forget what we've said. And I think as you look at this slide, you know, it provides you an opportunity to make sure that we look at what we are doing and how we are doing it. I want to thank our esteemed panel of superintendents, Mr. Ortega, Dr. Perez, Dr. Echion, Dr. Baker, for their honesty, for their authenticity, for the actions and practices that they have shared, but more importantly, what they have provided to their school community, for their creativity, and for their empathy. We heard so much being spoken about care and taking care of each other's, and that differs from what maybe our typical practice is in administration. The care that they've identified as a priority in engaging not only their students and their families, but equally as important, the entire school community team, because they're right, we can't do this alone. I believe that we have taken away from today's panel discussion this morning the importance of, as we identified by everybody, empathy, collaboration, communication. You can't do this all alone. An attitude to be patient with ourselves and to be patient with others. by being able to assess our school climate, our school community climate, our student climate, and probably most importantly, the value of self-care, as well as the importance of providing a space for change. So what I would like to do is, we've got a number of questions that have been presented to us by the participants, and we still have our four esteemed panelists to answer those questions. So I'm going to open it up to an open forum of questions that have been shared with us. And I ask any one of our four superintendents to respond, or multiple ones to respond if you've got something to add to that. But I'd like to start with one of our burning questions asked by several, and that is, how can school districts and mental health professionals best collaborate together in this time of need for your school community?
I'll begin, and I don't know if this is best, but we can definitely share examples of what we've done in Azusa. So in collaboration with our partners, one of the things that, because we do hear the community and their stressors and the things that they're going with, we did partner in collaboration with one of our mental health partners, and we created a parent learning network. Sometimes parents, if you say, hey, this organization is doing this, check it out, there might be some hesitation. So we decided that we were going to take the lead. So the district is providing this parent learning network, but we're bringing in our partners who are the experts in the field to help our parents on the topics that are most important to them. But again, we felt that just putting it out there and saying, hey, you can go here, or you can do this, that we wanted to take the lead so that our community knows that it's our district in partnership with these entities.
Outstanding. Is there any other superintendent that would like to add to that particular question?
I can just add a little bit. Our high schools, many of our comprehensive high schools have wellness centers, which have become a hub for, especially for our high school students, to find resources, to connect with staff. They're operating virtually, and so that's a place. And then I want to just really give a shout out to our family resource centers. For the last couple of years, we have regionally oriented family resource centers, and that staff is providing great support and connecting with community agencies and trying to both uplift and put out information about not just their own resources that are available and pretty widespread, but also how to bring in our local guidance center and the work that they do to expand our school-based mental health resources, most of whom are also operating virtually. And so while, this environment is very different, I think there are lots of opportunities, and we've actually heard many stories that students are more comfortable actually interacting one-on-one with the counselor or with the psychologist in the virtual setting. And so anyone who's listening, I would just encourage them to really think about the resources that exist and not shying away from using them virtually if at all possible.
Excellent. Thank you for that information. Any other superintendent like to share their wisdom on this?
I think the definition of partnership has changed during this pandemic. We have organizations that do not necessarily think of themselves as mental health support partners, but their ability to become more inclusive and create, even if it's virtual mentorships or internships for our students, has allowed us to expand our footprint as a school district and become more seamless. So we've really changed the definition of partnership to be more inclusive, and have gained partners that we did not necessarily know would be interested in working with us, but it really has allowed us to expand the group of individuals who put the youth of our city at the center of every conversation.
Outstanding. I think the next question really falls in line and maybe continues this conversation, and that is that Social activities for our students include education and discussion about mental health, but how are your schools providing these during the pandemic times?
So I can share with you again, that has through the curriculum, that has provided a space, every day for these conversations to take place. They're not necessarily happening every day, but the opportunity is there. And because the opportunity is there, because we were intentional in creating that through units of study, it's part of the support strategic plan, the SEL support for all stakeholders. Being intentional that way has created that opportunity for that to happen. And I think that that's one of those transformational pieces that I hope will continue even after, because I think that we have seen what we're capable of doing when we're intentional about it. We have seen what is actually possible through different mediums. And because of that, I think we've been able to utilize resources at a deeper level and also have conversations that were not really happening to that level before. In some cases, it was just isolated, or there was a stigma attached to talking about mental health. But I see more of it becoming more of the norm now, because it's, as my colleague Jill says, we're under this arc of this pandemic. So that alone, that reason, creates a feeling of safety to talk about these things. And hopefully, when all this is over, because it will be, we will have become so comfortable with this and with each other that it will indeed continue.
Absolutely.
May I just add to that really
Certainly.
focusing on our student voice panel prior to COVID, and now actually even more, has allowed our students to be the drivers in the seat. And that what we're all hoping for is for our students to be our leaders. And they are telling us what their needs are, and it has helped us focus as well across the district, across our high schools in particular.
Excellent. And if we could shift the discussion slightly, and we have not spent a lot of time, but there have been a couple of questions posed with regards to student and staff safety. And what are some of your priorities at this moment when we speak about student and staff safety?
Well, I can share that in Paramount, for me as a superintendent, communication is so vital. And, I challenge myself to find ways and opportunities to communicate with all of our stakeholders and to create those opportunities as well. From creating information on a website with a link to ensuring that, when we meet with principals, when we meet with our assistant superintendents, that these are things that are intentionally not only discussed but explore, and also looking at what our colleagues are doing through their own websites. What are they creating for their own, and learning from them to be able to bring this to the district, because this is a first time opportunity. We've not been through these things before. So you want to make sure that, you cover all your bases to be able to create these spaces for your employees. So we look to each other for ideas and for support in order to create that. And also listening to them, working with our associations, and hearing what they are saying, listening to what they are saying, and also asking them, what is it that you need that will make you feel safe? What is it that you need? A lot of it, from what I have learned, is just the stressors of, am I doing a good enough job, through distance learning? Am I really reaching my kids? There's a lot of insecurity, a lot of anxiety that still remains. And being able to, just through a lens of compassion, be able to provide that encouragement to everyone creates a sense of safety for all of us. But I do believe that, we have to be intentional about creating those spaces, and we have to be intentional about discussing it as well.
Thank you. So nicely said. Mr. Ortega, do you have something to add to that?
Just a small thing. So obviously there's the physical safety and the protocols and the guidelines that are out there in terms of how you might bring staff and students back on your campuses. But there's also the emotional safety and the mental safety as different people are dealing with this in a very different way. So what we've done is we put together a group that has representatives from parents, all of our labor partners, management, to hear all of those perspectives as we're starting to navigate the return of students on our campuses, the safety protocols, and again, not just the physical ones, but the mental, the emotional ones as well. And that has served us well to be able to hear different perspectives in one room. So staff, classified staff is hearing certificate is hearing parents are hearing management, and we're all having a robust conversation, and that those voices are in the room together as we navigate this really tough time as we get closer to students on campus.
Excellent.
I'll just add.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just add one thing that has been part of our thinking around this year's district goals is to think about classified staff and certificated staff as one in this environment. And in the shifts that I was able to make in terms of my first year as superintendent, our work with the business offices and all of the business officials, we're looking at ways to be in this work together in a way that perhaps didn't happen before because of the need. And so when I think about an excellence and equity agenda, it takes all of us. It takes the leaders of facilities, the leaders of maintenance and operations. And so we're using different opportunities to engage our entire leadership team across the district and what it means to be an anti-racist organization and to have an excellence and equity agenda. As much as our teachers and our principals are important to schools, our classified staff and leaders represent a really important part of our community. And we've taken opportunities, for example, in our return to school advisory panels to really think about academics and business in different ways and how we can be together in the going forward of the district.
Excellent. And Dr. Eschean, I know you had something to say as well.
I just wanted to offer an example. Sometimes it's really important for us to analyze the root cause of why our employees do not feel safe or are not feeling comfortable in returning. And soon you'll find out it doesn't have anything to do with the physical distancing or the masks or the plexiglass. It's about they have children at home that they don't know what to do with, or they're worried about individuals in their close family. And these are the things that are preventing them from their ability to wholeheartedly want to return. So one example is our guidelines have changed during the pandemic. So if a teacher wants to teach from her classroom and bring her 2 kids and they form their own pod, and we're incredibly careful about the fact that they still have to sign in, temperature checks, can't leave anywhere beyond where they're going. It helps allow that teacher to teach well and still feel that her own kids are safe. There are many different examples that speak to, we don't have to do things exactly the same way because those were our guidelines before, but that's nurturing the nurturer and not asking them what would help them really get to that place is a good solution.
Outstanding. And really thinking outside the box when we're doing this. It's not the same business as usual anymore. And it allows us to expand those opportunities. I want to turn to another question, and that is when we spoke about engagement and we spoke about how we engaged our families and staff and students, the question that was posed by one of our participants is, has that engagement continued, particularly with your staff and your parents? And what do you attribute that continuance of engagement to?
I think the liberty of saying none of us really know this pandemic well has created a forum for dialogue that is much more honest and participatory. Everyone cares and everyone has an opinion, and we're here to facilitate the dialogue leading us to the school district that we want to become when we are post-pandemic. I've seen a huge increase in participation at all levels, including students.
And perhaps we can expand upon that with the participation. Are you finding that those that hadn't participated in the past are now currently participating and beginning to engage? Or is there a difference in your level of engagement with those that are engaging?
At least for my experience, and I've been doing this in Glendale for 15 months, so I'm not far ahead of Arturo and Jill, who started in July, is we had leaders who were always engaged, and they were clearly speaking for the majority of the school. And now I've had the superintendent's parent advisory for the second year, and individuals are self-identifying and saying, I would like to be part of your advisory. That would not have happened in year one. They were waiting to be appointed or selected or referred. And now they've decided that they have to be part of the decision or the dialogue, or some decision will be made without their opinion, and they're not willing to take that risk. And I encourage that. I would like to be as inclusive as possible, and voices that do not agree with me are not preventing me from having them on in the dialogue, and it's really fruitful. It's a different lens.
Absolutely.
I'll just
Mr.
add,
Ortega?
yeah, I'll just add really quickly, like Vivian, the numbers of people participating definitely has grown. The type of parent and staff that participate has grown as well. But one of the things that I have been just super impressed with and proud of is the amount of leadership that has been shown during this pandemic from all nooks and crannies, from every corner, the willingness to step out and be leaders, in particular, whether that's committees, whether that's groups, whether that's forums, of folks really rolling up their sleeves and wanting to do what's right for our community and for our district. And so that has been something that has really warmed my heart to see how many people are stepping up to be leaders during this pandemic. So that kind of speaks to the how people are being engaged. And I think that's a really good nugget for us in Azusa.
Absolutely. Dr. Perez or Dr. Baker, I want to make sure you have an opportunity to add to this important topic.
I will share that one of the unique things that has happened, and it wasn't intentional, it kind of happened, as I was trying to get information out into the community in Paramount, which has about 55,000 residents. We have about 10 Facebook groups of parents that are of different interests. And I started to, even though we have our own, Facebook page at the district and individual school sites, I started pushing out information from my own personal Facebook page to these groups because I wanted them to know about the resources that we were providing, from the Tech Tuesdays, training opportunities for parents, and other YouTube live type of meetings that we were having and training for parents. So I started pushing out to them, and before I knew it, I had formed kind of a parent group that now direct messages me all the time from these 10 different groups. And so the families I have gotten to know, and it's a lot of families, but they do share through direct messaging or through Facebook. And also they themselves are contributing to other families through Facebook. And it's kind of an informal network, but I have to say it's become a very special network for me to be able to hear from our families about their own challenges or their needs, or how a school may not necessarily be meeting their needs. so that I can help them with that. And that has really been a personal joy to be able to have this group that I feel is like my group that is advising me or letting me know things when things aren't going right or what we can do. And also at the same time, they are very encouraging as well.
And very unintentional how it all came together, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Excellent. And Dr. Baker?
I would just add, I think it's, we have tried so many new things in the last couple of months that our challenge will be to sustain the levels of engagement that we've seen for the past couple of months. We put a lot of effort into our learning continuity and attendance plan engagement, including holding a second public hearing, multiple community forums for just open-ended input, again, the use of thought exchange. That also was part of the beginning of my superintendent's advisory committee. And so we have had incredible engagement and new voices at the table, but we have not really analyzed that data. And I think our biggest challenge will be how to sustain that, especially the challenge of doing it virtually. But really, I feel really hopeful about what I've seen in the first couple of months from our community.
Absolutely. And I think we have time for one final question. It is kind of a robust question, so you can determine what parts of the question you may want to speak to. But we have a number of special populations of students. And from our foster youth to our unaccompanied youth to our homeless youth to our special needs youth. And are there any particular strategies and efforts that are being made with regards to IEPs or assessments or that virtual world and the needs of the students, as well as the needs of our foster youth and other special populations that we attend to within all of our school communities?
I think it's important that we always prioritize the needs of our students and direct our resources. So in our ability to bring students back on campus, we've certainly taken the liberty to have our students come on campus by appointment for assessments and also for services. And the first student group that will be returning on campus are our students with special needs in self-contained classrooms, and our students that are emergent refugees, new to the country, English language learners, our homeless and foster students. And we've used that same formula for our childcare since July 1st. And we've been very public about it, because truly, if we are having that equity dialogue, we can't bring everyone back at the same time and pretend that everyone is receiving the same amount of support at home or is able to work and function in a distance learning environment. So being very clear about our return plan has been really helpful to our community. It has managed expectations for all of us.
We had developed a plan as well for reopening under a hybrid model, and obviously that didn't happen in LA County. However, similar to my colleague Vivian, we have been on it. We have taken advantage of the opportunity to bring in our special education students for assessments, our EL learners, and for services. What we are about to engage in is we had put together a back to school task force of about 155 stakeholders to create that initial plan for a hybrid model to come back. And we're about to bring them together again since LA County is allowing us to look at bringing back small cohorts of students. We definitely want to prioritize the needs of our students, and those that are most vulnerable be able to, under this model of small cohorts, meet their needs. But we plan now on bringing back this task force to develop a unique plan for serving on campus the needs of our most vulnerable students, and how best we can do that under the parameters and limitations that we are under due to the guidelines by the Department of Health.
Thank you for sharing that.
I think it's important that we involve groups in developing these plans because of the fact that all of our stakeholders have their own fears and concerns and inhibitions about working under a pandemic. But if we prioritize and communicate, what our goal is to meet the needs of our students and allow them to be the ones to create these plans, I think there's more of an opportunity for us to be able to put them into motion and be able to have the outcomes that we want to have on behalf of our children.
Absolutely. Their contribution will create your success and the success of the students and staff.
So may I just add, Dr. Baird, that
Absolutely.
regardless of how many students return on campus in our gradual staggered schedule, the mental health support can't change, because with the location will not necessarily eliminate the need, and that we have to actually continue to build on that, because yet it's another shift that our community members, parents, students, and educators may not necessarily have experienced in the past. And we actually have to escalate opportunities for grade level and school panels to be running the entire period and beyond.
Absolutely. There'll probably be an increase rather than a decrease. Mr. Ortega, if you'd like to add?
I'll just add one thing. One of the things that we did right now currently with our distance learning plan is to have equity and access via the calendar or the schedule that we put out. So we have protected times just for students with IEPs or students who are English language learners built into the schedule that are protected. And that schedule is not something that's internal. It's also shared to the entire community so that they understand that the schedule itself is ensuring that our students with IEP and our English language learners are getting protected time on a daily basis from our staff. And so as we look to returning, hybrid, staggered, we're going to challenge ourselves to continue kind of ensuring that our students are getting what they need by actually putting it in our schedule.
Thank you. That's excellent recommendation. Dr. Baker, if you want to close out this question.
Sure. Just one thing to add in addition to what my colleagues have shared. We have an effort to have specialized curriculum staff work alongside, who are support to special education students in particular, that work alongside general education curriculum development staff to ensure that the curriculum that's used is really focused on accessibility and supports for students with an IEP. And that really has taken them to new places in terms of looking at accessibility, looking at how to incorporate ASL into classrooms virtually, and how to use all of the resources that are available virtually to connect with students in a way that honors as much of what's in their IEP as possible.
Absolutely. And there is so much information, and we could spend days in any of these topics dialoguing. I want to again thank you. I want to thank you on behalf of the participants for your contribution, your expertise, for taking a risk in sharing the unknown at times, but still sharing. And I'd like to remind each of you, as well as all of our participants today, to always take time to replenish your soul. We put a prompt at the beginning of today's session, but it's important that we're mindful of that as we're taking care of each other. And with that, again, a huge thank you on behalf of Los Angeles County. And I'd like to turn this platform back over to Mr. Valdez, our MC.
Thank you so much, Dr. Baer. Appreciate you facilitating this critical conversation during this very critical time. So thank you for doing such a wonderful job. And thank you, as mentioned earlier, to our 4 superintendents. I think you'll agree these are outstanding individuals that are doing a very challenging job in a time that no one has ever experienced. So I agree. I hope that our 4 superintendents are taking care of themselves so that they're energetic, that they have the passion to continue this work during this important time for our community. So thank you all for everything that you do every single day. Now that we have heard some incredible insights from our very proactive superintendents, we'd like to also hear about this very important topic from a student perspective. Joining us again today in dialogue with our guest students is Dr. Byron Young. Dr. Young is a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist, as well as an emotional wellness program developer and consultant. He works primarily as a psychiatrist and psychiatric consultant with the Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health Specialized Foster Care Program. Dr. Young is passionate about being impactful in under-resourced and marginalized communities, particularly communities of color. He focuses on the intersection of mental health, social justice, racial justice, and the arts, and develops and consults on creative programs and initiatives to serve as tools for the improved emotional wellness of communities and organizations. Dr. Young, we're happy to have you join us again this week. I'd like to introduce our wonderful students who will join Dr. Young in the conversation to discuss best practices and lessons learned that can help guide us in our work, all from our community schools. Ariana Epps, welcome. Guadalupe Vasquez Lorenzo, welcome. And Yaraña Serrato Bucio, welcome. Welcome to all three of you. Dr. Young, it is all yours.
Hey, thanks so much for the intro. I appreciate it. I'm really glad to be here with you guys again for our second session. And so this portion of the session is really about elevating student voices. So I'm going to do a kind of a panel with the students, but also in order to keep everyone engaged and also to get perspectives of everyone in the room, we're going to use this software called Menti. And so basically it'll turn your phone into a audience response system to help us kind of connect, and we'll get to get your perspectives as well. On occasion, we may try to pull your perspectives into our conversation, and maybe even have folks sometimes either type in or unmute to share a perspective too, but really just highlighting the perspectives of the students. And so today's session is focused on kind of the teachers and administration and kind of their experiences with the COVID and quarantine and that kind of thing, but kind of getting the students' perspectives on what they think about what their teachers and such are going through and kind of how that affects them. I'm going to share my screen. So if you go to, on your web browser, whether on your computer or on your phone, if you go to www.menti.com and you type in this 7-digit code right here, it will connect to your phone with the presentation and you can kind of chime in. So most of the questions are kind of just typing in your perspectives, but there are also some Likert scale, so agree, strongly agree, disagree type questions, and also some questions, I think a few true or false ones. But whatever, these are the questions that we'll be engaging in conversation and having you guys engage along with us using this platform. So let's take it away. To all the my fellow to the panelists, thank you so much for coming and look forward to engaging in discussion today. I should say that the students have been really brilliant in helping to develop the questions that we're using, and really excited to have them here with us. So also, when you're filling out an open-ended question, we would ask everyone to first put whether you're an educator, provider, parent, just so we could see kind of who it is that's giving these particular perspectives. So just writing in bold educator if you're like a teacher, and then giving your perspective after that. Just curiosity, just so folks could say, oh, this is the perspective of a person who comes from this particular angle. So this first question just asks how everyone's feeling. I'm going to ask my panelists to, so for all you guys out there, please feel free to type in what your perspectives are, you know, however that is, whether good, bad, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But for my my panelists, could you guys let us know how you're feeling today?
Okay, I'll start on this question. It's pretty simple. A question, I mean. So I myself, I'm feeling a tad bit nervous, but also very excited and very, well, I am very excited and I'm very, yes, I am.
Excited and nervous.
Yes, excited.
That's cool. Well, we're glad to have you and excited to hear your perspective. Would the other panelists like to give a perspective on how you're feeling?
I'm also feeling nervous right now, and I'm really looking forward to see how it's all going to go out right now and how I have a chance to use my voice. So yeah, great.
Cool. Glad to hear.
Yeah.
I'm also. Can you hear me?
Yep,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry, I had audio issues. I'm feeling good. I'm excited to be here, and I'm also a little nervous.
Okay, cool. Well, most folks are excited and nervous. Yeah, that's fine. Totally fine. As you can see out in the audience, we have a lot of folks who are also tired, overwhelmed. We got some excited people, some exhausted folks, some hopeful folks. But I think it'll be fun. No pressure here, just giving our perspectives, kind of having dialogue. This is for the folks just to know who's in the room. Are you a student, a teacher, a parent, administrator, provider? While folks are doing this, could I ask you guys to tell a little bit about what schools you're at and what grade levels you are?
So I'm a senior at Little Rock High School right now, and we are currently all online. So yes.
Cool.
I'm a senior at Azusa High School.
Cool.
I'm also a senior at Azusa High School.
Okay, cool. Oh, and for the folks out in for the folks on our team who are helping, could you help me? If there's anything in the chat that comes up that's interesting that you feel like you should chime in, please unmute and throw it out for us to chew on as well. As we can see, we got some students, some teachers, some parents, a bunch of administrators, a bunch of providers, and a whole lot of others. I found that last time we did this, a lot of the others were interns and stuff like that. So we got a lot of folk in the room. As you answer some of the questions, some of the multiple choice questions, we'll also kind of separate those questions into like who's in the room, so we kind of get a sense to see who's answering what. I just think that's an interesting kind of reflect on things. And I know some of this is like intersectional. Some people who are teachers are also parents and that kind of thing. We know that. Thank you guys so much for participating. So this is our first question. At my school, teachers and staff of color are adequately supported by leadership from a racial justice standpoint. And so this is something for everyone in the audience to think about. Particularly, I know we probably have teachers in here, but for the students on the panel, I guess from your perspective, from your vantage point, what do you guys think? Do you feel like, one, I guess the percentage, we talked about this before, a lot of you guys said there weren't that many teachers of color at your schools, but for those few, how do you feel like they are being supported historically and currently?
So I see the choices are strongly agree, neutral, disagree, and strongly disagree. For my school, I believe that it's mostly neutral in a sense that, so for teachers, the support around the racial justice standpoint is not strong, it's not out there, it's not being said, but on the flip side, it's also not being discouraged either. So that's why I believe it's neutral.
Thank you. Is there a particular, oh, sorry, please.
No, it's okay. Go ahead. You may talk.
Oh, no, I was just going to ask, is there a particular level of like stress or a particular level of frustration that you feel like you see the teachers of color in your schools seem to be experiencing even before Corona? Was there a particular level of stress that you felt like they faced, or a particular difference in how comfortable they appeared, or how they navigated teaching versus other teachers?
So I feel like every teacher is different, of course. In my high school career, have had a total of 2 African-American teachers, and they were both very on different ends of the spectrum. So freshman year, I had an English African-American teacher. He was very outspoken. He was very firm in his beliefs, and he made it a point to facilitate that in his classroom. And so it was very great in that sense. And this year, as my senior year, I have another African-American teacher. She is also an English teacher, but there are 2 different sides of a penny in a sense. They're very different in the sense that she is not as outspoken, and I feel like that's mainly because of your mentally, you have to like make a choice to choose to speak out, and it's a lot harder to do that when you are not given that initial support of, hey, let's do this, or in that sense, yeah. So like for an example, so February, when it was African American History Month, we had announcements where every week actually on Mondays, we would do this thing where they would kind of pop quiz us. They would give historical facts and say, who is this famous African American person? And then you'd answer through the office. And this was a really big focal point, a very big point at our school, to where we took a step forward and recognizing all this, that there is history behind this, and kind of teaching students in that sense. So that was really great when we took the initiative to actually incorporate it in there. So I feel like we've been getting a lot better over time, and that teachers are beginning to get that encouragement, the motivation to start to speak up in that sense. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate that. So you're saying historically it sounds like there wasn't a lot of room for people to bring their kind of racial identity into the classroom, but now there's something that people are, well, you had one teacher that did, one teacher that didn't feel comfortable, but this thing that happened in February for Black History Month was a way in which teachers could bring that kind of thing into the classroom.
Essentially,
is that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. For the other panelists, do you feel like you've seen expressions of your teachers of color bringing that energy into the classroom, bringing that like connectedness in the ways in which they engage with you? Has that been a thing you've noticed?
I feel that it varies significantly on the teacher. Some do it and they make it very important to acknowledge their own race and experiences, and ours as well. Other teachers, they don't. In terms of support by leadership on the racial justice standpoint, I haven't personally seen it outright and spoken about, yet I don't notice many teachers are uncomfortable. However, if they are, they don't really speak out, except I've had one teacher who was very straightforward with us, that she felt that she wasn't being heard and supported about her race one time. And so I think it depends on each person and their own experiences, and I've noticed it varies.
I think you were that.
Yes, I agree with Ariana and Yarania. It depends a lot on the teachers themselves. Some will open up to students, and then there's others that they'll just go on with their day. But yeah, I mean, mostly in my school, from what I've seen, teachers seem to be fine. I mean, that's what they appear to seem. I'm not sure if inside they are having some conflicts with the racial justice standpoint. I'm not really sure. And if they do, I mean, they just don't speak about it. So we as students don't really know what they're going through also. So, so yeah, you know, it's just like how we can't really guess what they're going through if they won't tell us. But we also respect that, because it is their personal life, and you know, we have to respect their own life and their own like safe space.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing to even think about what the lives of your teachers are like outside of, you know, the notion that they have lives outside of just teaching you, and how as people of color we experience a particular type of thing when it comes to how schools embrace us or not, when it comes to how, you know, the environment embraces us or not, and recognizing that those teachers, even though they're teachers, that social identities do sometimes matter in terms of how the world will embrace you or not, and that it probably matters in these contexts as well. So I think just interesting to think about. So good. I thought it was a cool question for that. So, but thank you guys for your perspectives on it. Before we move on, can I ask if any teachers out there, I know there were a few people who were teachers, if you would like to unmute and give your perspective on it, we'd love to hear it. I'll give you like 5 seconds to unmute and come in if you can. Oh, okay. I don't even know if they have the possibility of unmuting, but would love to hear teacher perspective if that happens. So don't be afraid to interrupt us, any teachers out there, because this is really about you guys and thinking about how students think about you guys. And just having that kind of theory of mind is cool, I think. Cool beans. All right, we'll move on to our next question. And thank you guys for all those perspectives. Most teachers at my school have a strong understanding of the life experiences of their students. And remember, this is all kind of like your opinion, right? What do you assume from just kind of the ways in which they engage? But most teachers at my school have a strong understanding of the life experiences of their students. Do you guys feel like, is this the thing that you'd be able to measure? And if so, how? And like, do you feel like your teachers get you in that way? Oh, should I call somebody to go first? I don't want to put anybody on the spot. Who would like to share first? I know Ariana went first. Maybe Guadalupe, would you like to say? Do you feel like the teachers at your school kind of get you in that way, that they seem to have a good grasp on your life outside of school, on your life, on who you are in general?
I'd say for me, if I had to choose, it'd be a neutral. It's mainly depending on the trust you have of the teacher. There are some teachers that you can go to and talk to, and then there's other teachers that you're probably not so comfortable of telling them about your own personal life. But to those teachers that you do talk to, they also come from a totally different background, and they have their own perspective of your experience. Like when you tell them your experience, they probably take it a different way. So I feel like it's, how can I say, it just varies depending the person, how they interpret your experience, because everyone sees things differently. So it's just like, some teachers may understand you, but then there's others that may have some difficulty understanding you, but they will try their best to understand you, which is good. It always is good to know that there's someone there for you. But yeah, I say just, how can I don't know. Yeah.
Can I to this notion of feeling comfortable? Like, did you say what it is that a teacher kind of does or doesn't do that makes you feel more comfortable to connect and feel more connected to them in that way?
I'll probably say, well, first of all, I'll probably say, if they're really easygoing. What I mean by that is, like, if they talk about things in general, they're not just focused on their classwork the whole time, which is, I mean, I know that's their job to make sure the students get the information, but here and there they should probably like make some jokes up. It makes the student feel a bit relaxed, and then we get to know the teacher as them as who they are. And through that also, the teacher sometimes comes and talks to you, and they're like, hey, like, are you okay? You seem kind of tired today. Like, are you sure there's something going, like, is there something going on in your life? And the student through there's like probably might say like, no, I'm fine. But they know that at least that teacher is worried. They know, they could sense that something probably is going wrong, is bad, better said. And the student has in mind that, okay, like, at least I know this teacher noticed it about me, but I don't have that connection with them to go up to them, tell them. But through that, the teachers like kind of constantly probably checking in on you here and there. It just builds this trust with the teacher, and that's when it pretty much goes that you could just talk to them freely, because that they won't judge you, and they'll be there to hear you and probably help you, give you some advice with your situations.
That's cool. That was really profound when you said this. They're like attuned to how you're feeling. They notice if you're a different way than you were yesterday. Like, so just this notion of being attuned and being consistent with kind of expressing that they're paying attention and care a bit is enough to kind of build that connection. That's cool. Thank you for that. That was really, really helpful. Anybody else like to share?
Yes, actually. So one point that really stuck out to me about what Guadalupe said was that it depends on that trust, that relationship you have with your teachers. And I feel like pre-pandemic, the understanding of teachers, the teacher's understanding of students' life experiences was neutral to a degree, because when we were in the classroom, we were there face to face. So usually over time, teachers and students build that relationship where when you're teaching, you may look back and see that so-and-so, student A, Bobby, has that look on the face that he gets when he is no longer understanding, whether it be furrowed eyebrows or a frown or just a look of like a distant look in his eye. And a lot of teachers take these little hints, these little clues to adjust to their teaching style. And these little hints, these little clues have built up to understanding of students, the way they react to things, the way they build on things. So in a sense, it creates a relationship. But now, as school is online, not everyone turns on their camera, and it's a little harder to build a relationship with students. So now that this form of communication is gone, in a sense, teachers are, in my opinion, I am not a teacher, so I do not know, but in my opinion, from what I've experienced, it seems that teachers are looking for new ways to make that connection now that we don't have that face-to-face interaction. So because of this, it is a lot harder for students to build that trust with their teachers, build that relationship, to open up to their teachers. So because of this, that there isn't that line of communication in a sense, I have to say, disagree that teachers understand life experiences of students.
So there's definitely something about the connect, like in order to understand their life experiences, you have to have a connection. And so like if you can't see them or have them in your presence, it's even harder to gauge. I know a lot of people were saying that the reason that they, and I don't know if this is true, but I just heard that the reason that they don't make folks have to turn on their cameras is because folks might not feel comfortable showing what their homes are like or showing the backgrounds of their homes and that kind of, and those types of, so in some ways, the distance learning would give teachers a lens into the home life of students, and there are ways in which that might be used to, to make unfair judgments and preconceived notions by other people or that kind of thing about if they were able to kind of peek into students' homes and stuff like that. So I think it's interesting to think about how teachers make these connections. I think I wonder, and I want to hear from everyone, but this notion of like, is there? I guess what I'm curious about is what are the intangible things that teachers do that make you feel like they understand, that make you feel connected? And what I'm hearing is, one, that they're checking in, that they're conscious of that. But two, I guess you're saying, Ariana, that there needs to be some place for connection, this kind of conduit for connection, this notion of like being able to and that the COVID virtual learning thing makes it even harder to have that connection. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, would you like to give your perspective as well, Urania?
I think overall I really much agree with what Ariana and Lupa said. In terms of understanding of life experiences at Azusa High, I feel like many teachers do understand us pretty well. Some even share life experiences. I feel like we are blessed and lucky that we do have more minority teachers compared to other schools, which is something I've noticed. I mean, we're not perfect, far from it, but we do have more minority teachers, which make us feel very comfortable, and they understand it on a personal level. Even ones that don't, they really do understand us. I've had teachers who aren't minorities and have really formed strong connections with us, and some, I feel like they don't understand us well, which is on the other perspective. But I feel like they are aware of it. They are aware that our lives are different. However, it's like a personal choice of whether or not to outright speak of it. I think it's due to their comfortability, how comfortable they are with the subject of different life experiences, and that, again, that student-teacher relationship.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask you guys a question? And what you said made me think of this. Do you feel, is there some type of comfort, some type of a good feeling that you get when you see that you have a group of teachers that kind of have your social identity, that maybe look like you or have similar backgrounds or come from a similar place? Like, is there something that feels good about that? Like when you talked about, I know from your perspective, you feel like there seems to be something really comforting about having people from similar backgrounds. Would you guys agree with that? That there's something.
So for me, this is definitely true. So how I mentioned how I had a teacher who was also a person of color. He was my role model in a sense. His confidence, his ability to be comfortable in his own skin, and the way that he was able to kind of incorporate his beliefs in everyday lessons was really engaging and really fun. And I keep this kind of in my head, this list of great teachers in my head, and he will forever be on that list. And I think like a partial reason for this is because teachers who tend to put their personal life, not like whole personal life, but give tidbits to their students that, yeah, we're human too. We understand what you're going through. We're kind of experiencing some of those things too. Let students realize that, yes, they're right, they are human. And sometimes some of these situations or like even stories that teachers tell is really great because you get to like kind of see them more than just as a teacher, you see them as a person. And it's really great because then in a sense you can have that bond and kind of have a role model. So I definitely have a teacher or a few like that.
That's cool. What I heard from Urania is that like having the teachers from similar backgrounds is definitely beautiful and something that feels really good, particularly when you can have them in mass. But also that it is possible for teachers who have different backgrounds to still feel connected to, and even when they don't feel connected, this notion of like recognizing that they don't understand, and that's important too. I think that's really powerful. But yeah, I think that's so cool. I'm so curious to know. We don't have to talk about it now, Ariana, but I'm so curious to know like what were some of the pearls that teacher gave that felt so powerful, connected. And as an African American person who had African American teachers who I connected with in that special way too, I really definitely I feel it. I definitely appreciate you sharing. Guadalupe, would you like to give a perspective on it? Like this notion of having teachers from similar backgrounds, is that something that you feel like feels special when it happens? You'd like to see more of it? What are your thoughts?
From my experience, I would say that it is a very great feeling that I have when I know that there are some teachers that we kind of share, the same background, or rather said, same culture, better said. Because I've seen that ever since I entered high school, I built a very strong bonds with my Spanish teachers, the ones who teach Spanish class. And I'd say it's probably because we both share that knowledge, that like those common those things that we could just talk about the Mexican culture, Hispanic culture overall, better said. We understand, we could probably talk about the food, the music, and things like that. So I feel like that is what created a bond between us. And it's great because because I know that if I'm going through something or if I need help with something, I can go to them and I can talk to them and I don't feel so lonely. But there are also other teachers who we don't share the same background, but there has been, it's mostly the way that they check in with students. They ask us, how are we doing? They make sure we are doing good. They ask us, how are you guys feeling with the workload? Because, teachers have to assign work and then we students are the ones who do it and we get stressed here and there. So it's always nice when they ask us even how the workload is. And, they also start making conversations with us. And I say, although we come from different backgrounds, that also creates a bond. And that is honestly a great feeling because, as I said, the student doesn't feel lonely. The student feels like they have a friend who isn't someone from their age, like a teenager. Because, we teenagers tend to have the same mentality. But having a friend that's an adult, it just feels great because you know that they will be there for you. And they will tell you something that will benefit you, and they won't tell you like, oh, do this, although it's wrong, but still do it. No, they'll tell you this is for your good. So it's your choice to either follow my advice or just let it slip away.
Yeah, thank you guys. Did someone want to say something? Oh, I thought. Again, if you're in the audience and want to share a perspective, please feel free to unmute yourself and chime in. Just say excuse me, I guess, and come on in. But yeah, we'd love to hear from folks out there at some point what you think about these things as well. So I'll give it 1, 2.
Actually, I would like to. There was a comment I saw in the
Oh, please.
chat. It was a quote. I'm looking for it right now. Here it is. It was from Liza. She said, just like good literature, connection comes from specific stories. And that really resonated with me because that's a really good point. And so, yeah, I just wanted to input that I think Liza is right, completely right in her quote.
Yeah, thank you, Liza, and thank you, Ariana, for it out. And please feel free if you guys see anything in the chat you want to bring to the conversation, please feel free. I mean, also, if you three have questions that you want to post for each other, we could also, we don't have to go completely on script. We could talk about that too. So, yeah, thank you so much, Ariana. So we'll move on to the next one. Oh, thank you, Liza, for the quote. So this is one of those open-ended ones. So remember, when you're answering this on the Menti app, if you could say what your role in the school is, parent, teacher, administrator, intern, whatever, before you answer the question, like just kind of put it in bold letters and then answer, just because we're curious to know who's saying what. But this asks, since the quarantine, what has your school done to support you and your fellow coworkers, your fellow parents, your fellow classmates in virtual teaching and learning? And so for those folks who are teachers and staff out there, funny, that's teacher and I appreciate that. Was funny to see the first one. Yeah, so for folks who are out there who are teachers, we love to hear how you feel like what your school has done. For folks who are parents, we'd love to hear your perspective. For folks who are students, we'd love to hear your perspective. But yeah, for the panelists, and maybe we could start with who do we start with? Was it Guadalupe last time? So yeah, maybe we could start with Urania about this question. From your perspective, what has your school done to support you and your fellow classmates, or done to support your teachers, your teachers as well, if you know, with virtual learning?
Well, our school made sure to provide students with Chromebooks in case they didn't have a laptop. They set up like tutorials on this spreadsheet where you can click and they'll send you to tutorials, and they sent those out to anyone who needed them. They have newsletters, and they make sure to have meetings, virtual meetings with students and with parents. However, I think it is important to know that I feel like our teachers weren't supported enough, especially when this first started, and even now I've seen how many of them are struggling, and I don't think they have the proper training. Many of them don't know how to work certain programs, and then we're all confused. Our computers have all crashed in certain classes. There's been many issues on that end, and I do wish that our teachers had been supported a lot more on how to manage this virtual teaching.
Thank you for that. That was very, very informative. Thank you. Anyone else like to share?
Yes, actually. So, Urania, holy cow. So everything you said, I agree and more. So our school district as a whole and around us, as soon as the pandemic hit, I feel like our community was really great on pouncing right on top of it and dealing with issues such as students who don't have access to devices at home. In our school specifically, we checked out Chromebooks, which is not unusual. I know a lot of schools did that, and it's really great. And we also checked out hotspots for students who don't have they don't have fast internet. So that was a really cool thing on top of that. And right now, one of the things that our counselors are doing is that they started a mental health, wellness type of, not study, but they started having weekly meetings on how to improve your mental health and how to stay on top of things, and just little helpful tidbits to help students. So I think it's really amazing. Within the week of when we got the notice that we have to go home and stay quarantined, our community made sure that all our students had Chromebooks, and that was really great. Another thing is that our community, we have daily lunches. So if you drive to any school, whether it be a middle school or a high school around your area, they'll be giving out school lunches and breakfast. So lunch for that day and breakfast for the next day, which is really cool. And one thing that our school is doing specifically is that they have meal boxes. So they give you ginormous boxes of food. I remember my family went to go to the day once, and they gave us 3 ginormous boxes. I think it was like onions, apples, potatoes, lunch meat. I don't know. It was a ton of stuff. So that's really great. So I feel like our community has done a great job on assessing those immediate needs, whether it be electronics, food, and data. But there's also, I want to touch on the standpoint that we could be doing better in the other standpoint.
Hold that thought, Ariana, because we're gonna ask what we. That's gonna be one of the questions coming up. What we could do better. This one's just more so what they have done, and I think maybe the next question, the question after that, asks what we could be doing better. So hold that thought. Okay, cool. Guadalupe, would you like to share what in ways in which you've noticed schools supporting students, parents, teachers?
I mean, as Ariana and Yerania have already mentioned, my school and my district, the district I am from, they have, given out Chromebooks, which is a great help because there are many students that don't have a computer at home. Then they have also, on the social media of my school, I have seen that they have put up image flyers, and it says like some support that families could get, such as internet. They tell us like what companies we can go to, and if they have any, how can I say, because I remember seeing once on my school's social media that said that they could apply for like a low income family, which I thought that was great because there are many families that cannot support paying internet. And there has also been, they also give out lunch. I think it's once a week for our district, which is great because I have heard, my mom's friends that they say has really helped them out because in this crisis, some of them were left unemployed and they don't have enough food to eat, but with the food they get from the school, it really helps them out, and their kids have something to eat throughout the day, and they themselves also probably could get something from the fruit they get. And also regarding the teachers, they have probably done a smaller tutorial for them to teach them how to use the apps. And the parents themselves, they have also received a spreadsheet that has a tutorial of how they can help out their students by logging into the Chromebooks using certain apps, because there are some parents that don't know, such as my mom. She doesn't really know much about technology. So, and her having to take care of my little sister who's just in kinder right now, and I'm in my class, so I can't really be going from one side to the other and helping them out. So through that tutorial, she actually learned how to use the apps, which is great because now I don't see her struggle so much. And there has been some support here and there, which has really helped out a lot, and it has really taught teachers how to use the apps, and parents, as long as also students, how to use the apps. But there could be some parts that could be improved, but that's by far what I've seen of the help that we have been receiving.
I saw a lot of the teachers people reflecting not so much or not enough. And so I think the next question will be asking, what can we do? What more can we do? But just to look through a few of these, people talked about all the things you guys talked about, like food and people getting hot spots and getting Chromebooks. I know I had some patients who took a long time to get that internet assistance. Like they signed up for it, took like 3 months or so to get it. So I know that was an issue, but it seems like the hotspot thing is really helpful. Also, yeah, I know for some of the Chromebooks, someone had mentioned that sometimes they were crashing and that kind of thing. But even the notion that I'm from New Orleans, and I don't think that Chromebooks were already having enough computers was something that kids even had in terms of having resources. So kids, they had those resources, but also the notion of even those things aren't quite enough. And if you really want to give a robust education, it's going to take a lot of resources, like getting the computers, but also learning how to use the computers, learning how to program them, and that kind of thing. But thank you guys for those perspectives. I think the next one does ask, you know what? Let's go to this question. Oh shoot! I wanted to ask a question about. Well, I don't think that question's there. I wanted to ask a question about. Oh, so maybe we could talk about it now, just before we move on to the next question. What would you guys? How would it look for you if they what would you like to see? Like Ariana, you were about to get to this point, like what they could do better. And everyone who's typing in, if you could share your perspectives, if you wanted to give a new perspective, what is it that you feel like they could do better? Because folks said not much, but I would love to hear what you think they could do to support.
What are
Ariana?
Yes.
You had some ideas about what you would like to see. What do you think they could do better, or how would it look?
So, on a superficial level, our school is doing an amazing job on hitting those essential needs: internet, food, and all that jazz. But on a deeper level, mental health, understanding of electronics, and getting that help that but getting assistance that you need for certain things, I think can definitely have a little bit more oomph behind it, a little bit more impact to help both students, teachers, and administrators that have to get into contact with these people. So for instance, what I mean is that, I feel like high school is the most challenging grade or section of adolescence to teach, because high schoolers can be mean. And there's a kind of saying that students can smell fear. And for the first month, this was very true. You could tell that teachers were very unsure of themselves, very stressed out for some of my teachers, and very, some of them were frustrated, fed up with the whole setup. And I think that a way to help this, one of the core to this problem, is because not all teachers have the support and the backup, the foundation of how to use some of these devices, apps, setups. So a lot of teachers are frustrated, especially for some of my older teachers who have been doing this for a certain way for 25 plus years. My music teacher has been teaching, I think, for 26 years now. So for 25 years, he's been teaching a certain way, and all of a sudden he has to completely shift to a different teaching style. And you can see the impact that it has on him. He was really frustrated for a long time, and that affected our level of education, the way we were learning. Our learning wasn't as impactful as it could have been because of this. So I feel like a thing that our school needs to do better on is getting that foundation of education, not education, but the foundation for understanding of the apps that we're using in order to get education across. And also another thing is that across the screen, for the younger students, I have a little brother, he has ADHD, and it's really hard for him to focus. And there's not a solution for that, because in school, teachers can be like, hey Trenton, focus. But when we're virtual, it's essentially a little harder to do that. So I think our school can really do better on coming up with methods to help students that may need a little bit extra help in that sense, because parents are of course at home, but they have jobs too, they're doing things too, and there may be siblings, but they have homework to do, they're in their own classes, so there isn't that much support for those people. So maybe schools can come up with a way to help support these students a little bit more. That's my main two things that our school needs to improve on.
That's a really powerful point, Ariana, and I've heard similar things. As a psychiatrist, I work with kids who have ADHD often, and that's definitely something that the parents have complained about, is this notion of having the one-on-one attention having the direct attention at school where a teacher could say, oh, you have like an assistant in the room who can kind of help keep kids on task, how it's that much harder. So yeah, that was really, really a powerful point. Particularly I think you find people like the laptops, the Chromebooks, the internet, those things work for a big chunk of people, but what about the folks with kind of a little extra needs, whether it be, extra needs from just financial difficulties or extra needs because of having maybe learning disabilities or having, some emotional difficulties. A lot of folks on the thread talked about kind of emotional health help as a thing, because I think, folks are kind of cooped up in their houses for a long time. They don't get to kind of go like you utilize some of the coping skills that they do, going to school and hanging with your friends and seeing your friends and getting to go to fun events and activities, or, can't go to Disneyland or those types of things. There are particular things that folks are missing out on where I think mental health is a big piece of it too. And so, yeah, Ariana, you did a great, you point out a lot of things that make this very challenging, but, again, we got to step up to it. Like kids got to learn. So we got to rise to the occasion and figure it out. Guadalupe, would you like to give a perspective on what you would like to see different? Like what you mentioned, a lot of things that you saw that you thought were helpful. Is there anything you feel like is missing or that you feel like could be more helpful?
To start with, I would really like our teachers to get more help, better said, training on how to use apps in these devices, because during class, when they try to use the apps, they kind of get confused with how things are, how the app itself works, or there's an issue or something comes up, and then they are trying to solve it. And then they asked us, they're like, if any of you know how to work this thing, please let me know. And sometimes we as students don't know. And we're just like, we're sorry, miss or mister, we can't help you. I'm like, we don't know how this app works. And it really sucks because it takes away time from their own class. We are, well, my school, we're doing block schedules, and it really takes time away from their period, from their period, Brett said. And if we don't get to everything they want to talk about, there are some activities they want to do with us, but due to them having troubles with working with the apps, we don't get to the activity, so we have to push it back for another day. But then they have other activities they need to do and other things we need to cover, and it just stresses them out a lot, because they're like, how am I supposed to fit all of this in, all of everything in, while teaching everything to my students and them understanding the concept? And that's why I say that before using the apps, they should get some training on how to use it. So once it's class time, they use it. Once they have to use it, they know how to do it, and they won't find themselves struggling with it. And it'll make class for them easier, and also for us, the students, it'll be easier. And that time that could have been wasted will actually be used in a very wise way, and we will get through everything we have to do for what they had planned that day.
Yeah. I appreciate that sentiment from both Guadalupe and Ariana, this notion that like the technology piece is a big one. So you get this technology, but not as savvy with it as you need, and it really does eat away from time or cause frustration that eats away from the quality of the learning. I think that's powerful. Hey, Ariana mentioned the music teacher thing, and just the notion of doing music over the computer is already, probably a tough thing, but the notion of trying to shift it to figuring it out, how that affects everything. But no, thank you guys for those perspectives, and that makes clear sense. And then also the notion that there's like a curve, like certain teachers might be able to pick it up faster than others and that kind of thing. So yeah, definitely thank you for giving that insight into it. Urania, would you like to give a perspective before we move on of what you would like to be different or added?
I agree with Lupe and Ariana. Just one last thing I wanted to touch on the support of students is that some teachers are having a hard time figuring out how much work to give us. And I've noticed that our workload has somewhat increased because while we're at home, I think they figure that we have more time, and that's been challenging on our side, and we would like more support with that. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's this notion, and someone, when we were developing these questions, I remember someone, and I'm not sure if we'll get to it, I know we're running out of time, but someone asked a question about empathy. I'm not sure who developed that question, but kind of Ariana and Guadalupe had talked about this notion of the teachers are struggling. And so this notion of like, how do you have empathy for it sounds like you guys do have empathy for your teachers as they try to struggle through this thing too. They have their own stuff. They got kids, they got, they have all these things that they have to worry about. So how do you have a sense of empathy for them, but also demanding a quality education, because you have to have this concern for yourself too, and for the quality of your education. And so I think it's a battle. For sure. But yeah, that's a perspective I never even thought about, Urania, this notion of like the changes in demands for you. And if like the quality of the education isn't as good, how should homework reflect that? How should homework even look in terms of not just the quantity, but what homework even looks like if it has to supplement education that may not be what it was. Yeah, that's all really, really interesting stuff to think about. But yeah, no, thank you guys for bringing all that up to the forum. So we're gonna move on. Sorry, someone want to say something? Oh, please, Ari.
Yeah, I'd like to add a little bit to that. So a really big point, like you were saying, was empathy. Like the earlier superintendents, a big goal for them was empathy and not equality, but equity in a sense. What do we need to do for our staff? What do we need to do for our students? And it seems like empathy is showing its face in different ways. Like for me, another example with my music teacher. So I'm the drum major at my school, so I hold a leadership role. So we work closely hand in hand to do things. I remember one day, he's very old school. So he had a CD that he wanted us to listen to, but he couldn't figure out how to put it onto the, put it into the computer and get it like going on his computer. So one thing, I remember we spent like a day trying to figure it out. I couldn't exactly see his screen, so we never ended up figuring it out, but we found a solution where we listened to his old record players, I think they're called, where you put them on the, so we started listening to those. So empathy may not show its face publicly, but privately, I feel like that is a really big thing. And for another one of my teachers, she was having a problem where people were dropping into her lesson and just spewing profanity and just hateful comments. And a really heartwarming moment was when, after the meeting, we didn't know this at the time, but everyone, but I think 3 students emailed her, were like, "We're so sorry about this. You do not deserve that. There's ways to prevent that." I don't know, a bunch of things. And the next time that we met up with her, she was like, "I just want to thank you guys truly and from the bottom of my heart." And she shared her screen and she showed us all the emails that we sent her, and she had, "This really made my day and I want to thank you for that." So empathy may not be present in the public view, but privately there's a little bit of action going on behind that. And then in the chat, and I think Urania and Guadalupe touched on the fact that it seems like there's so much work and not enough time. And I just want to propose a possible solution. So one of my teachers, what she started doing, she teaches AP statistics, and she records her lessons and she posts it on the Google Classroom. So because she moves very fast, because we have a block schedule too, where we have certain classes on certain days. So she moves extremely fast, and sometimes it's very hard to catch all of it. So she records her lessons and she posts it on the Google Classroom, so you can go back and rewatch it. And so you can, this allows for teachers to teach at that fast pace that these block schedules are requiring of you to in order to get in the full curriculum. Yeah. So I think that's a really great little tidbit, little tool that's that can really help with that. And then she has office hours for questions, so that's really great too.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ariana, for that. And yeah, I think the notion of recording, if you're on Zoom, you can record it anyway, so why not record it and let people kind of process through it more? That's a good idea. That should be a staple, that you have access to those recordings. But we run out of time, and I really want to thank you guys so much for all this. I think this notion of like, how can you remain empathetic and like understanding of things not being quite how you want, but still push forward to make them better, right? Whether that's racial justice, social justice, or just having the necessities to learn in general. But thank you guys so much for your words, your perspectives. I know we got to move on. I see they're nudging us out, but thank you guys so much. That was great. And thank you all in the audience for participating.
Thank you, Dr. Young. Appreciate it. And Ariana, Guadalupe, and Yaranya, I looked for nervousness. Never saw it. Never saw an inch of nervousness from the three of you. I saw confidence. I saw people that were articulate, intelligent, and you spoke from the heart. And truly, we appreciate it. There's over 300 people listening in, and I'm sure they appreciate all of you, your experiences, and your willingness to share your stories. I think we're better for it. Dr. Young, thank you so much for helping us with our panel and really getting to the root of some of the issues and concerns that are out there. I'd like to also thank our two principals from these schools that provided our panel of outstanding students. Dr. Martin Gomez, he is the principal at Azusa High School, and of course, Jose Barajas, the principal at Little Rock High School. We're excited to share that we'll continue hearing student perspective in each of our 4 parts. We now have come to the end of the second installment of our school symposium. We hope that you found today's panel discussion and student interview informative and insightful, and that you're ready to put what you've learned into practice. We want to remind you that this symposium is a 4-part series. Our next symposium will take place on Wednesday, October 7th at 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. And we will focus on parent-caregiver engagement. Please keep it on your calendar and make sure to participate. And another reminder, if you have any questions related to the next session, we welcome those questions in advance to the email address that was shared in the chat box. Also, we'd love your feedback on this session. We ask that you please, please, please take a few moments to complete the survey that was shared via the link and QR chat box. These surveys are extremely important to us as we help to put future symposiums together. So please take the time. Before I leave, I want to thank everyone that made this great day possible. It's been a tremendous collaborative effort that could not have been done without endless hours of planning. So I want to start by thanking our UCLA team. Thank you, Laura McMullen, Valerie Somner, for your support. To our DMH friends and our partners, thank you, Elizabeth Munoz, Charlotte Carter, Mari Serrato, Victoria Montenegro, Aisha Ishtag, and Dr. Bear. And extra thanks to Rebecca Hurtado and Claudia Duras for their efforts in coordinating everyone to come together and make this event happen. And of course, to Kanji Tate, our MC last year that raised the bar. Kanji, you are the Billy Crystal of Academy Awards, the Oprah Winfrey of talk shows, and the Jose Gonzalez of LACO. I want to also thank our fabulous LACO team. Thank you, Dottie Isaias, Sean Tu, Jennifer Matley, Gerald Grant, Elsa Garcia Sanda, Marina Skates, and Jose Gonzalez and Jewel Forbes. I also want to thank Frank Olmos for his excellent work in putting this program together. This concludes our second session of our school symposium. We are going to stay on a while to answer any additional questions and allow for people to please complete the satisfaction survey. On behalf of UCLA, DMH, and LACO, thank you for your participation and commitment, and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.